Welcome back, everyone. This is the Oracle Decodes, the Wonder of a Woman and the High Priestess. So we're going to start out this piece with some information you can find on Wikipedia about the very well-known character, Wonder Woman, who is property of DC Comics. So what we're going to do, I think everybody is pretty familiar with the Wonder Woman character and her general story. But what we're going to do is start out at Wikipedia and just pull out a few pieces of information given about this character's origins. So according to Wikipedia, you can find out that Wonder Woman's origin story is that she is both divine and royal, and she was created by her divine queen mother from clay. Now, later origin stories make Wonder Woman the daughter of the Greco-Roman god Zeus as well. But either way, Wonder Woman is divine and royal herself. She is Princess Diana, that's no coincidence, in her island Amazonian nation. And her being an Amazon woman gives her an increased stature, right? Because Amazon women are thought of as giants, which is also in reference to not just her royalty, but her divinity as well. Now, this divine Princess Diana is Wonder Woman, and she has a secret identity when she is the American icon Wonder Woman in what is commonly called America, right? When she's here, she goes by the alias Diana Prince when she's not in her Wonder Woman costume. Her costume, her origin story, her powers and technology that she uses have gone through a few different transformations since her creation for DC Comics in what we commonly call 1941. But through comic books, cartoons, TV shows, and even film, the Wonder Woman character has overall remained pretty consistent in how her adventures unfold, and I think, like I said, everyone watching is probably pretty familiar with this character and how she appears. Like in this image here of who we know to be the actress Linda Carter on the Wonder Woman TV series that ran during what we commonly call the 1970s on TV. So with all of that, let's plug the Wonder Woman character into the sky story with the help of this real all-seeing eye, or this real oracle, as I've called it, and we can really decode the story that we're being told with Wonder Woman. So just to orient everyone quickly to what we're looking at here, what I call the real oracle or the real all-seeing eye can be found by the viewer facing due south when looking at the sky, and the green line running vertically down the middle of the image is the north-south meridian line, and that helps to orient the viewer due south. Now that red arc of the ecliptic, that red arc that's in the horizontal plane of the image there, where it's crossing the north-south meridian line, that red arc of the ecliptic is a special place in the sky. It's a narrow band in the sky where you'll find the sun, the moon, all the known planets, and all the known zodiac constellations rise in the east and set in the west along this arc of the ecliptic. Now, as you look at the shape the arc of the ecliptic makes to the Earth's horizon, you can start to see why this area of the sky has been described by knowers of this knowledge in the past and the present as perhaps an eye, or an oracle, an island, an arc, a boat, a mountain, a plateau, or even the top of a tree. It all depends on the storyteller's imaginings when creating a memorable tale. Now, this is a familiar scene if you've seen our videos before. We're looking at a screenshot from Stellarium. This is a free online program that you can find to verify everything that I'm going to show you here. And we've queued up a screenshot in Stellarium from the perspective of someone in what we commonly call America. The reason is because the Wonder Woman character has become an American icon, right? So this is from where we should be viewing the sky story, at specifically where we've queued up this screenshot for the summer solstice, which occurred this year on what we commonly call June 21st of 2020 at high noon. High noon is chosen because here it's when the sun reaches its zenith, or its highest place in the sky that it reaches all day. But on summer solstice, the sun is reaching not just its highest zenith in the sky that it reaches all day at high noon, it also reaches the highest point in the sky, or the highest zenith that the sun will reach all year. So it's at the top of the pyramid, in other words. You can think of it like that. Now, we've talked about it before, but when we're looking at this summer solstice scene, it's because what we're finding out through these videos is that all of these stories, from ancient stories, including even religious texts, all the way up through our modern day tales, all use this same sky story template. What I call the real all-seeing eye, or the real oracle, is a template that's encoding for various ways to keep time, or ways to keep a calendar. And from all the clues that were given in these stories, many of them start their calendars at either the winter solstice time of year or the summer solstice time of year, like the Wonder Woman character clues us into begin at the summer solstice. When you're viewing the sky story through the real all-seeing eye lens during the summer solstice at high noon, things get a little bit trickier, because even though stellarium is showing us the stars that are in reality in the sky at high noon on the summer solstice above our head, we all know that the sun's light is too bright to see the stars that are out. So in other words, the sun's light keeps those stars invisible or occulted from our eyes. So what we're looking at here is at least partly what is really meant by the term occult science. So the summer solstice in what we commonly call America at high noon, stellarium gives a view of these invisible or occulted stars, as we've seen before. But as we've also seen before, even stellarium has a few tricks to keep certain things occulted as well, but we're still going to see right through it anyway. What you can't see identified by this big picture view of the summer solstice sky at high noon, we need to adjust to a slightly different perspective in stellarium to see what is actually there. Not only the moon that's present, that dark spot right there next to the sun, there's also what we commonly call planets, 2 of them actually, and their alignments are worth noting for this Wonder Woman story we're decoding. So the first planet occulted by the light of the sun at high noon on the summer solstice is what's commonly called the planet Venus. Just to the west side of that special crossing point of the north-south meridian line and the arc of the ecliptic, smack in the middle of the constellation of Taurus, which is crowning that all-seeing eye, or the real oracle there. And then on the other side, the east side of that special crossing point of the north-south meridian line and the arc of the ecliptic, we find what we call the planet Mercury, right in the middle of the constellation of Gemini, or the twins. All right, so with those pieces of information, let's zoom back out to a big picture view of the summer solstice and find out who the real Wonder Woman is. Our old friend Orion, you can see right at that special crossing point of the north-south meridian line in the arc of the ecliptic, but this is the first time that we're seeing Orion transgendered, and for this story is dressed up like a woman, a Wonder Woman, actually. Orion is described in many stories about him as a giant, but for this story, Wonder Woman is a giant herself, right? An Amazon woman. Take a look at Orion's shape in the sky story. You can see that this was reimagined in the Wonder Woman story to be a woman with a very hourglass-shaped figure, right? The DC Comics illustrators even placed a circle of sky behind the Wonder Woman character, which fits perfectly as she's encoding for Orion in the Sky story. And let's talk about the way specifically that she's dressed, all encoding for both Orion's time and location. The iconic American red, white, and blue is telling us specifically to be looking at the summer solstice into the American holy day or holiday celebrated as Independence Day, that time of year. And even the stars on her bikini bottoms. It's a detail to let us know Wonder Woman's or Orion's location in this area of the sky. As we've seen in previous pieces, it's also known as the Celestial Sea, the same celestial sea that Bob, who is a sponge, lives in, as we saw in the last video. Wonder Woman also wears a tiara. And remember, she's a divine princess of Greco-Roman god lineage, Princess Diana. And she's from an Amazonian island. So Orion, being at the top of what you could call Mount Olympus from Greco-Roman mythology here, also makes sense when you're looking at the Sky story, how a description of an island might also fit in here, and does. But if you look just above Orion's head, you'll note the constellation of Auriga there, which we've seen before in previous videos. Auriga these days is known as the Chariot, but looking at how Auriga is shaped, you can see once again that because of that and its location, crowning Orion's head and being at the top of the all-seeing eye as well, that a description of Auriga being a crown, or in Wonder Woman's case, her princess title and tiara she wears on her head fits. Also notice that the constellation of Auriga also connects to the constellation of Taurus in the Sky story. So you can see how a story about a divine royal line or shared crown makes sense in many stories, including this one, where Princess Diana or Wonder Woman was birthed by her divine queen mother, representing the constellation of Taurus, sharing the crown of Auriga with her daughter here. And remember, although it's occulted by the light of the sun, you'll also find the planet Venus crowning the constellation of Taurus's head as well. Now remember, on the east shoulder of the constellation of Orion, or Wonder Woman's shoulder, is the planet Mercury, also invisible but still there in the constellation of Gemini, or the twins. Gemini is encoded in Wonder Woman's story as her dual identity, as Princess Diana or Diana Prince, the alias Wonder Woman uses when not in her superhero costume. In this case, I think Gemini is encoded as a double-layered meaning, as also that the constellation of Orion was transgendered in the Wonder Woman story, and why her alias is Diana Prince and not Princess. The real transgender agenda that's being pushed lately by the Liar Liar Pants on Fire Secret Drama Society cult has much more to do with them keeping this kind of knowledge occulted from the rest of us, and the particular practices they participate in to honor this kind of transgenderism that they're worshiping here, seen in the stories they ritually act out, than it has anything to do with anyone's real variation in their sexuality that includes transgenderism. Wonder Woman is holding her special lasso of truth in her hand in the DC Comics drawing, as you can see. And if you look at the Sky story down near Orion's foot, that huge constellation in the west called Eridanus, or the river, was reimagined by the creator of this Wonder Woman story to be her lasso of truth. And to Orion's, or Wonder Woman's, east in the Sky story, you will find the constellation of Monoceros. And we've looked at this constellation before, known these days as the Unicorn. but by the way it appears in the sky story, you can see where the invisible jet Wonder Woman flew around in for many years was reimagined from. So just to be doubly sure we've decoded Wonder Woman correctly, let's look at this last bit from Wikipedia about a specific epithet given about Wonder Woman in a comic book issue. She's as beautiful as Aphrodite, wise as Athena, swift as Hermes, and stronger than Hercules. Aphrodite is easily decoded. That's encoding for the planet Venus. As wise as Athena is encoding for the constellation of Taurus, in which Venus happens to be on the summer solstice at high noon in the northern hemisphere in alignment with. Hermes encodes for the planet Mercury, found over Wonder Woman's east shoulder in the constellation of Gemini. So that just leaves Hercules. The constellation of Hercules isn't visible from this perspective. You have to shift your viewing perspective of the all-seeing eye to the opposite side of the Earth. And that's where you'll find the constellation of Hercules, crowning the cross of the north-south meridian line and the arc of the ecliptic in the southern hemisphere, where there it's winter, which is why Orion, or Wonder Woman, is also stronger than Hercules, as she's at the top of the mountain with both the sun and the moon in her hand. Now, let's take a look at the same northern hemisphere summer solstice scene and now decode the High Priestess card from the tarot deck in a way I've never quite seen done before. Not like this, anyway. So in previous pieces so far, we've decoded the number 12 card of the tarot deck, the Hanged Man, the 0 card, which is the Fool, encoding for leap year, and both also encoding for Orion, as well as the number 1 card, the Magician. The Magician specifically encoding for Orion at the place to start, the way to keep a calendar, which the tarot deck itself is also encoding for. Which is why you can now see that the tarot, the reason why it's used as an oracle to tell the future, well, it's easy to write what looks like prophecy when you know the future in the cycles that are repeated in the real all-seeing eye or the real oracle in the sky above all our heads, isn't it? The next tarot card we're looking at in the sky story here is the number 2 card, the High Priestess. During the summer solstice, the constellation of Taurus, as we've seen, shares the crown of Auriga with Orion in the sky story, and while Orion holds both the sun and the moon in his outstretched hand, which is where we begin with the Magician in the tarot deck, being the number 1 card, means that our next place of focus in the sky story then is not just the constellation of Taurus, but remember the planet Venus is also to be found at the crown of the constellation of Taurus as well. It's this specific alignment the High Priestess encodes. The summer solstice at high noon, the constellation of Taurus in alignment with the planet Venus, sharing the crown of the all-seeing eye or the real oracle. That is why the High Priestess's crown on the tarot card is shaped like horns, like the horns of Taurus the bull. And the sphere represents Venus in the middle of the constellation of Taurus, like it's in the middle of the High Priestess crown. The High Priestess sits in front of now what you can see, since we've already decoded it in a previous video. We see what looks like the tree of life she sits in front of. This tree of life diagram used in the study of Kabbalah, which we now know encodes for the constellation of Orion. So when you look at the sky story and compare it to the High Priestess card, you can see now, because the alignment of Venus in Taurus is above or in front of the constellation of Orion at this time, or in front of the Tree of Life, this now makes sense. Behind the Tree of Life on the tarot card, you can see the blue sky meeting the blue waters. And it continues in the High Priestess's robes as it flows and ripples down to her feet, appearing very water-like as well. And this is encoding specifically the High Priestess's position in the all-seeing eye, the real oracle, also known as the celestial sea area of the sky. And the cross on her chest tells you exactly where to look for her, right at the cross of the north-south meridian line and the arc of the ecliptic. In her hand, she holds a book with the word Torah on it. The first 5 books of the Jewish Bible. The Torah is still found in the Christian Bible as well, giving us an idea of how ancient this knowledge is and where it's been occulted, hidden in plain sight in all of these stories. The High Priestess sits between a black pillar and a white pillar called Boaz and Jachin, and they encode for the east side of the arc of the ecliptic where everything rises, and then the west side, or the west pillar, of the arc of the ecliptic where everything sets. The crescent down by her foot, many think encodes for the moon, others Venus, and I say it's both, and also very likely the planet Mercury too. Most know that the moon goes through phases, and one of them being a crescent, like the shape at the High Priestess's feet. But many might not be as familiar with the fact that both the planets Venus and Mercury also exhibit this phasing behavior as well, which is what I think the crescent shape is actually encoding at the feet of the High Priestess. The fact that all 3 of these phasing celestial bodies, the planets Mercury and Venus and the moon, all pass through the constellation of Taurus during this summer solstice time of the year. But on the summer solstice at high noon, it's the planet Venus that is found at the crown or at the head of the High Priestess, or Taurus, at the top of the real oracle in the sky story. We'll end things there and pick it back up in our next piece. Until then, be well.